All right, now let's take a look at switch and case. So let's start by declaring a variable called role. Let's imagine this represents the role of the current user. Now we want to see if this user is a guest or a moderator or an admin. We can easily implement this logic using a bunch of if and else statements. But there is another way, using switch and case. So let's have a look. We start with this switch statement. We add parentheses, but instead of adding a condition here, we add a variable. In this case, we're going to add the role variable. Now we add curly braces. Then we add one or more case statements. Each case statement is used to compare the value of this variable with something. So here's our first case. If this role equals guest, so I'm comparing the value of role with guest. Now we add colon, and then after that we add one or more statements. So we can do a console.log guest user like this. Now here we need to add the break statement. So we jump out of this switch block. Otherwise, the other statements here will be executed. Let me show you. So we need to add another case statement. If this user is a moderator, we want to display console.log moderator user. Once again, we need to add the break. So in this case, if I don't add this break statement here and the role equals guest, both these console.log statements will be executed. That's why we need to add a break to jump out of this switch block, right? Now, we can have as many case statements here. There is no limitation. Optionally, if none of these cases are matched, we can have a default statement and execute one or more statements. So console.log unknown user, or more accurately, unknown role. Now here for the default statement, we don't need a break because at this point, the control would automatically get out of this switch block, right? So let's save the changes and see what we get on the console. Save. We get unknown user because I have not initialized role, so its default value is undefined and it doesn't match any of these case statements. Now if I change this to guest, save the changes, we get guest user, and similarly if I change it to moderator, we'll get the moderator user message. So here's the takeaway. With switch and case, we can compare the value of a variable against a bunch of other values. Now they don't have to be string, they can be numbers or even booleans, but using booleans here is less common because if you want to compare the value of a variable with true or false, it makes more sense to use an if statement. Now, just to let you know, we can implement this exact logic using if and else statements. Let me show you. So if role equals guest, note that I'm using strict equality here, so triple equal signs, and that means we're checking the type and the value of this variable against what we have on the right side. So if role is guest, we want to do a console.log of guest or guest user. Else if role equals moderator, then we're going to do a console.log of moderator. Finally, else, if the role is something else, we want to display unknown user. Now compare these two implementations. You can see implementing this logic with if and else is cleaner and shorter. We don't have all these break statements or default or these curly braces. These are extra noise in the code. So it doesn't mean you should never use switch and case. Well, it depends who you ask. I personally tend to use if and else more often. Switch and case are kind of outdated. They look a little bit ugly in my personal opinion. But there is nothing terribly wrong with them. Sometimes they're more explicit. It comes back to your personal preference.